Welcome to yet another session of Dr. Spotfire. I am Dr. Vishakha Manju, your host for this session. Once again, learning is not driven by answers, but by questions. So here is my team. I have Divya Jyoti Rajdev. She would be joining us shortly. And I have our campaign coordinator, Anna Aprenko. And we have our featured presenter, Dave Lee, Director, Spotfire Enterprise Architecture Group. A lot of you might be knowing him already because he has been very active on community with his JavaScript, OSI Pi, and many articles. So let's get started and hear from him.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are in the world. Look forward to this session today. I'm going to be talking about how we have combined a couple of different features within Spotfire to provide a way of being able to do visualizing of different chart types. So we're going to look at basically using R graphics. So we're obviously TIBCO has its own version of R engine, and we call that TERR, TIBCO Enterprise Runtime for R. Now, TERR has many thousands of packages. CRAN provides a resource where we can download different packages, and there are many of them now that really provide some excellent visualization capabilities. So we're going to look today at how we can combine some of those graphics capabilities with our JSViz extension and bring those visualizations into Spotfire. So rather than talk about it, I'm going to show you a couple of examples. There's nothing particularly special about these examples, but they are ones that we have out on the community site. And then I'm going to explain a little bit how they work and how you can set them up. So first example we're going to talk about is an example we have out on the community site right now, and I'll be showing you the links to these articles in a few moments. And here we are using a couple of R packages to produce a Sankey chart. Now, this is something we don't have in Spotfire as a native visualization. So this is a kind of a neat way of being able to very quickly produce a Sankey chart. It does respond to marking and filtering, so as we make changes here, you're going to see that the visualization will update. So what's happening here? Behind the scenes, what I'm doing is I'm using a data function, and it's actually going to be using some R code. So what I'm doing is I have a data table in Spotfire. I'm sending that data table over to our TERR engine, which is running this R code. I'm using a couple of different packages here. I'm using a network package that uses D3, and I'm using the HTML widgets package. And what's happening is these are then creating the Sankey chart, and then they're converting it into an HTML page. So if you were running this in RStudio or at the TERR console, when you run this code, it would open your browser and show you a web page. But we don't want that to happen. We want that visualization to come back within Spotfire. So what we do, a couple of extra steps that we add on to the process here. We use this package, this network D3 package, to create the visualization. Then we create a temporary file. We write the contents of the HTML page into the temporary file, and we say, we use a special flag here to say, put everything that I need into this HTML file. So don't reference any external JavaScript files or CSS or anything, but everything I need into this file, and then we'd send it back to Spotfire as the output of the data function. So the input is the data table. The output is basically it's a big long string, which is going to be the contents of the entire HTML page. So then what we do is in Spotfire, we map the input, and then the output, we put it into a document property. So what's happening here is the entire HTML content is going to come back into Spotfire. It's going to be written into the document property, and actually it's this property here, HTML data. Right, so after the visualization has run, we then use JSViz, and here I've got my JSViz visualization. I've turned off all the banners and everything, so going in here. And when we set this up, the only thing we have to do is we just have to tell it to use this special syntax. So what we do here is we say, my entire visualization is this one HTML file. Use the contents of this document property, and this %% syntax is a special syntax that we use to just say, don't get your contents from a URL, get it from this document property. So the entire contents of that string is then used to populate the visualization. So we simply say, use this as the sole content, and hey presto, we get our visualization. And it's very simple. If we take a look at the contents coming back, we won't actually see anything in here because it's such a big string that Spotfire hides it. But if I go into this, I press my select all and copy, and then if I go down to here, you can see that basically this is the contents that come back from the R code. So it's a HTML page. And it uses this special syntax here where we say encode the contents of the JavaScript files and put them in here. This means that we don't get any problems when we send the things that have strings or other characters in. And then JSViz then takes this and displays it in this page here. Now, as I mentioned before, the other nice thing about the setup here is that whenever that string changes, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change a filter. Spotfire recognizes that I've changed the filter, so it passes that. You might have seen down the bottom here, it'll say working. It passes that new filtered version of the data table to the R code, re-executes it, updates the contents, the HTML coming back. JSViz recognizes that and redraws the visualization. So we get a fairly nice interactive display here. Downside is we don't have any marking in this visualization. So we have filtering that changes the contents of the display, but we don't have marking that would allow us to then drive other visualizations. So there are some restrictions. But the nice thing is we get a visualization that maybe we would have had to do a little bit more work. Maybe we could have used JSViz with some Sankey Chart code, but this is a fairly simple way of putting it together. And another example here was one that we did. So this kind of shows you how you can get fairly interactive graphics as well. So we're using an extension called NDTV. You can see that you get kind of mouse capabilities here. There's also like a video replay. So this allows the data scientists to see the progression of the data over time. This sample doesn't actually use any data in Spotfire. What we're doing here is we're actually just generating a sample data set. And then to show the same kind of concept, as we change the number of slices, it's going to rerun the data function. You might see that pop up there. And now we have 11 slices along the bottom, and we can play that. So same setup. We have the data function here. The script is here. You'll see that we're actually using a sample data set for this demo. We create our temporary file. We execute our R code. Here you can see that it really is only a few lines of R code to generate this visualization. We use this keyword here within the library to say embed, which means that we put all the resources that we need inside that string that comes back, and we write it into the document property, and then JSViz again displays the visualization. And the last step is to return that file data back to Spotfire. Again, we map the input and output parameters. So in this case, the input is not a data table, but it's actually a property that says how many slices of data we want. And as that changes, Spotfire will re-execute this data function. And then in the output, we're returning it into this HTML data property. Okay, so what we've got on the community, these two articles, both are written up with the steps necessary to recreate these visualizations. So the first one is the Sankey Chart, and the other one is around the NDTV example. A little kind of word of explanation around my setup here. I'm actually using the new version of TERR that came out about a couple of weeks ago. So if we look at my Sankey Chart, the way I have it set up is that I'm using my Spotfire statistics server to execute these. Right now, TERR 4.3 is shipped with the latest version of Spotfire, the 7.10, and TERR 4.4, which is the new release that has even more compatibility with our packages, came out a couple of weeks ago and is available, but is not yet been hotfixed into Spotfire. So as of the date of this recording, first week in November, we don't have TERR 4.4 within the regular Spotfire analyst client. So for purposes of my examples, which use some of the newer features of TERR 4.4, I've updated my statistics server, and I'm using it to run these examples. Within a few weeks, what will happen is there will be a hotfix for Spotfire comes out, and then you will be able to run these in Analyst 7.10, obviously, but you'll also see it hotfixed back into other releases of Spotfire. So that's TERR 4.4. Some other things to think about when you're producing these visualizations. So if we look at the flow here, the data, or properties, I had both examples. I had an example that sent the entire data table, and I had an example that only sent a property. That gets sent over to our TERR process. You can then execute your R code. We create a temporary file. We return the contents of the file as the output parameter of the data function, and then, of course, we tidy up after ourselves. When we map the inputs and outputs, we map that output string to be set into a Spotfire document property. Beforehand, JSViz is set up to monitor this document property, and then when that data comes back, it causes JSViz to redraw the visualization, or actually to just redraw its entire contents. Now, you do need the latest version of JSViz 3.40.10 to have this behavior, the simple way of putting in that document property. And as I mentioned, you are, for package compatibility for these examples, you are going to want to use TERR 4.4. However, there are a number of other examples that actually work with older versions of TERR. So as many of you will know, package compatibility is something you just want to be mindful of. And so we recommend when you're following the examples that you actually use the specific versions that are outlined in the write-up. So some things to remember if you were going to use these techniques with your own packages you might get off CRAN, is that when we return the HTML content from the TERR engine, JSViz needs to know how to find those resources. So if you're online, it's okay to have the visualization be returned as an absolute web address with a server and a protocol, a full path if you like. That's okay. As you saw in the sample that I showed earlier, it's okay to also have the resources be embedded using the base64 encoding. That's okay. What won't work is if they use relative paths, and a lot of the libraries by default use this syntax, and JSViz doesn't know relative to what because it's getting the entire contents back as a string. So it's important that you figure out if there are any explicit options to avoid this syntax. And if you set it up and it doesn't work and you look at the contents and you see this, then you need to go and see if you can find a parameter within the library. So in the D3 movie example, we set the output mode to be HTML. We tell it to embed the scripts, and we tell it not to launch a web browser at the end of the R code. Otherwise, it will try and you may find windows popping up of Internet Explorer or your default browser. And so these are things that, you know, these are things that you learn as you go along that have to be set up. And also, it's a good idea to delete the temporary files. If you don't, those will be removed when the engine does its tidy up cycle or when it's shut down. But if you are building an application where you maybe have a lot of people hitting your stat server, then you will want to do this as a matter of course just to avoid things kind of getting congested. And then there are some other things. If you were to put this into a production environment, this is kind of an advanced option. We'll mention this just for completeness. The HTML return can be quite large. In the example I showed you there, it's about 30 kilobytes, and that goes into a string in Spotfire. Some of them can be quite large if you have a very large network graph or other visualizations. And having many users hitting your stat server, if you're in production with a web player and you are using your stat server, that's a lot of data to be sending backwards and forwards. So most of the libraries provide a way in which we can actually trim that down and say, hey, don't send me all the JavaScript code every time. I'm going to add that into JSViz as a specific JavaScript file. And you know, if we go back to here, the NDTV actually, you can change this HTML option and say JSON, and have it just send you back the JSON data that makes the visualization. And then you can add in the JavaScript and CSS files into JSViz. And then it will cache them. The browser, the Chrome browser that we use in Spotfire will figure out that I already have that file. And I don't need to you know, serve it up. I don't need to pull it from a web address. And that's a more efficient way of handling the or reducing the size of data that's being passed backwards and forwards. Okay, so we've covered a lot of material there. You know, looking at the timing here, I think we've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to recap, and then we'll pass back to our doctors for some kind of question and answer and overthought. So to recap, the visualizations are produced using R code, and I think I mentioned TERR. You can also use open source R using the TIBCO statistics server, Spotfire statistics server. And yeah, so you have the capability of any of the libraries that are available on CRAN to produce these visualizations. And basically, we're using a data function. They do respond to filtering on the inbound. So when I change settings here, that would mean that you will get the visualization to update, but we don't have any marking capabilities from this visualization to others. So an excellent way of producing these fairly interactive and complex visualizations without really having to know a lot about HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and gives you access to the sheer power of the R language, and specifically our TERR engine, or the open source R engine. So at this point, I think I'm going to pass it back to our doctors, and we'll open up the floor for any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Can you make me the presenter?
Yes.
All right, that was really great. Thank you. I will send on chat the resource link that Dave just showed, and also a couple of other related resources. We're very happy to see this week that we have a lot of questions coming in from the audience. However, it's a little bit difficult to pick up ad hoc questions on the fly without any preparation before. Since we don't have the data, we would have to. So it's recommended that you please post your questions on community with hashtag Dr. Spotfire, like you can see on the screen, and we'll pick it up and answer them. But for today, we'll try our best to show you a few tips and tricks on how you can achieve the results in question. Go ahead, Vishaka.
Yeah, so one of the questions on QA panel, I don't know whether it is from the same user. It's the same question. I want to navigate to a detail page on clicking the bar chart or pie chart on one page. I have a bar chart with city names. When I click on the bar of any city, it should redirect me to other page, which has details visualization for that marked city. So there are multiple solutions for this, like we could go for scripting or data functions, which can do this with a very one-line code, or simple data functions also. But what I like is to show you kind of couple of out-of-box options. So what we can do is, say, if I insert a text area, in the text area, what I have here is I have an option here where I can actually edit my text area and add action controls. So when you add action controls, you have action controls as navigating to another page. Say, for example, if I say topics and I would type anything, go to topics. So this is a simple out-of-box option where I don't need any scripting at all. I just simply need a kind of a button which will navigate to another page. I can click OK, and I have this button. I can kind of change the format and other things. So I have this button, and whenever I will click on this button, it will go to topics page. So this is a simple option where you want to move from one page to another. But in this question, what I see is you don't want to have just a button. You want your visualization. So the moment you say you want a city, so that you can click on that city and then you can move to the next page. So that's what I have done here. This is a graphical table. What I have done is I have picked up my store locations, which are 4 cities. And on this page, like a new page, what I would do is I would create a visualization, or let me go back here itself. So what I want to do is I want to create a details visualization. So I can right click. I can say, give me a details visualization, which is, let me pick up a simple table. That's it. And when I mark here, I would see only Boston. So if I mark Los Angeles, I will see only Los Angeles. Now what I want is, not only I want to see this details visualization, but this details visualization is on another page. So let me move this details visualization to another page. So let me create another details visualization. Let's say I will create a bar chart. So this is Los Angeles. Instead of store location, I would add store number. So this particular visualization, what I want to do is I want to have this particular visualization on another page by marking. So what I can do is, so let me show the title bar. Without the title bar, I'm not able to drag visualizations from one page to another. So once I have this title bar, what I can do here is I can create a new page. I can go back to test area. I can drag this visualization and drop it here. So this is basically a details visualization. Whenever I click New York, this page will show me New York. And let me trellis this so that we can see by each store location. You can see I'm looking at New York here. It's detail of that city. Now, the second part is you want it to happen, like instead of user manually going here and clicking on this page and then seeing New York, the moment I click on New York, you want it to happen. And that's something which is available within a graphical table. And this graphical table has multiple things. You can add, I have added this bar chart as a bullet graph, which is simply, and I have added this as showing electronics. So I'm looking at this as sum of electronics. I could add other comparative values as well. So what this particular visualization has, that you can have actions. You can perform actions on click. So when I click perform action on click, I can say settings, and I can say, okay, take me to the page. So navigate to the next page, whatever the name of that page is. I have added that action here. So I will be able to click on Los Angeles and then see moving to the next page, and then also seeing the details visualization. That's it. So there are two things which are happening. One is the details visualization, which is because of limiting by marking, and second is action being performed when you click here. So when I click on Boston, it will again take me to that page, and it will now show me Boston. Now here, this is a details visualization. I created it using a shortcut, but what I can show you is the background is it says my data is limited by green marking. And the green marking is what is the marking color for this visualization. So if I look at the properties of this visualization, you can see marking color for this visualization is. So whatever is marking by green, that is what is that details visualization. So by using action controls and by using a graphical table, you will be able to do that. Now, the question asked about bar chart. Now, in bar chart properties, right now, we do not have anything where these action controls can be attached to a bar chart, but I definitely agree this could be an idea which could be added as an enhancement. But we have this feature available in graphical table, but definitely on our ideas portal, DJ can help you with the link to the ideas portal. You can definitely submit that as an idea, that the same thing. And I think there might be somebody who has already submitted it, because we have this option within a graphical table. So that what was the first question. Then the sub question with it was that when I view my filtering, so when you view your filtering and you might have unchecked New York, irrespective of that, when you move to this page and you view your filters, this kind of New York is unchecked. So the filtering gets carried to the next page. That's what the question was. But if you look at your filtering schemes, so if I go to edit document properties, there is a filtering scheme associated with each page. So when you pick your filter choices, you are actually picking that filtering scheme. If there are two pages having same filtering scheme, that's the way it is designed, that whenever you pick certain filters for that scheme, whichever analysis page uses that scheme, it would be kind of applied there as well. If you don't want two pages to be unrelated, like you don't want filters at one place to affect another page, just do one thing, create a new filtering scheme. So call it page 2 or page 3 scheme, whatever your option is. So you can pick that scheme and say, okay, this is my scheme. You can check this show filtering scheme menu in filter panel. You can click OK. Now you see there are multiple filtering schemes. When I click on page 3 scheme, you can see there are all locations. But when I go back to this scheme here and pick filtering scheme, New York is not there. And if I go to test area, it uses New York's that filtering scheme. That's why the New York is not there. And the moment I pick page 3, you can see all 4 locations show up. So whatever changes you are making to filters on a particular page, they're actually happening to a filtering scheme. By default, there is only one filtering scheme. And the moment you create multiple filtering schemes, you can have some pages relate by same filtering scheme, other set of pages by another filtering scheme, or you might have individual filtering scheme for each page. So that was, yes.
Can you also, on the same subject, can you also show the data limiting by current filtering? Because if for a particular graph, that would be the easiest way to remove it.
Yes. So for here, when you limit your data, not only you can limit data by marking. If I scroll down, you can see I can limit data by a particular filtering scheme also. So if I have a particular filtering scheme, particular set of filter options, which may be not just picking a location, which may be combination of multiple things, I can have visualization kind of pick up that scheme, and that way I could have multiple visualizations having different filtering schemes on a one page. So there is one option. Then there is also option of limiting data by expression.
Yeah, by default, you will always see that use the current filtering from the page is selected in every visualization. Let's say you just want some visualizations to not have any particular filtering scheme, use all the data by default, whatever action the user selects. It could be an overview page or something like that. Then if you just deselect this, that would make your visualization use the entire data and not be subject to even the current filtering scheme. This option is by default checked for all visualizations. Go ahead.
Yeah, so that was our first question. So it's like, since it was like Dr. Spotfire tag, so that's how we picked it. And I think this was the same question, not sure if it's from same user, same question we picked from our chat panel. So then there is another question which kind of, I would say there are two questions together. Is there a way to add in the added columns when adding more rows? So you can add columns, you can add rows. Now, whenever you add columns or whenever you add rows, by default, what happens is you have an option to add columns or add rows together. What I mean by that is, say, for example, if I have a data table, and so I have this quarterly results. So I have account ID, I have salesperson, I have Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. Now, I want to insert rows. So I want to add more rows, maybe some new accounts came. So when I want to add more rows to this, I will click select, I will pick up my file. I have deliberately created a new file with some couple of new records. I will open that, and you can see I have account ID. So I'm inserting rows. I have a salesperson, I have latest forecast date, I have Q1, Q2, Q3, and I deliberately added another column called as type. So I have just these 5 records or 6 records where I added type, which is an additional column, which was not in my original data or which is now with the new accounts, and I just call them joint or single. I click OK, and then I click next. This is where I have to match because I'm appending, I'm inserting rows, so I need to match as far as possible all the columns. So I kind of, since the names are same, it automatically matched it. If names were not same, then I would have kind of manually matched. This is Q1, this is now called something else. And you can see here there is this column still shows that there is a new column coming in the new data. When I click next, this is where it gives me that option. Do I want to include that new column or not? The moment I check it, I was doing insert rows, I was adding rows to my data. But I also got an option where I can add that column. Now, the important thing to note here is the new column which will be added will not have any values for the original data rows. So if I create a column name, which I call as source, so value for new rows is new, and value for original rows is the original data. So just I give that a name. So I will have two new columns. One is type and one is the source column. And when I click finish, now this is a common thing. When I click finish, I see, oh, there's nothing added. The reason you don't see that in the table visualization, I usually look at this columns. Originally, I had only 7 columns, and now there are 9 columns. The reason you don't see that is because in a table visualization, sometimes add new columns automatically, or maybe by default, it is unchecked. So even if new columns were added, they will not be added to your table visualization. So I can add them manually, or for future, I can keep it automatically. It depends whether I want to add new columns. Usually we keep it unchecked because there might be some calculations you are doing, some kind of expressions you are doing. You don't want to kind of have that be seen everywhere. So we, by default, keep it unchecked. But again, you can manually add it or you can keep it checked. Now see, when I'm looking at source original, the type column is empty. That's what I meant, because you are adding a new column which does not have any value earlier. But when the source is new, which is the new kind of rows which I just added, they have the value for type. Now it's possible I can insert a calculated column and some kind of calculation where I can say for the original column, this is how type will be calculated, or it may be coming from somewhere else where I could kind of add it. Whatever ways I have that information, I could kind of add that. But when you are inserting rows, and you have an additional column, it's very simple, it's very easy to add that, but the only thing is the original rows may not have any value, any data for that column. So going back, so this was adding more rows. Now, while I'm talking about adding more rows, we can always add more columns also. So I can select a file. I can say I want to add more columns. I'm just arbitrarily picking the same column. No, let me pick another file. So let me pick this salesperson record. So here what I have is I want to add columns, and I have these sales people, and I have salesperson here as the matching. I want to add year of service of salesperson and his region to this data. I can click OK. When I say match all possible, there's only salesperson which will match. Then I can click next. I can say I want my columns to be year of service and region, and this is what will decide what will happen to my rows. If I pick left outer, then I will have same number of rows. But if I pick full outer, it is possible there were salespeople who had no accounts. I would see their year of service and region, or there are some accounts for which I don't have any salesperson there. I would still see that data. So depending on my data, I would see more number of rows. And the moment I click finish, right now I have 35 rows, I have 9 columns. My number of columns should change to 11, and let's see what happens to the rows. The moment I click finish, I still have 35 rows. It means that every salesperson which is there in my original data that existed in this as well. And I have Bill. I can see Bill's year of services too. His region is Midwest, and I'm able to kind of add that column to this data. So you can always insert columns which might end up adding more rows. You can always insert rows which might kind of end up as adding columns. So the way your data is, you would see different options. Now my next question is this one, which is here where we have how do I reference a second data table when creating a calculated column. Now this is kind of a wider topic which talks about more about relations and column matching, and I want to kind of take it real slow so that you would understand the subtle difference between two things. So let me undo this. I have this original table with just the source. Let me add another data table. So I want to have 2 data tables. Let me add another data table, which is this salesperson. So I've kept these data tables as simple as possible. So let me go back here, have that data table, and insert test data. So you can see, yeah, I have a salesperson. I have salesperson, and I have here another table which is quarterly result. In between these two, the relationship which can exist is only salesperson. If I pick Alice, I can see Alice somewhere here if she exists here, and then I can see her Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4 values. Now, I do not see, even if both of these tables have same marking, you can see the marking is same. I do not see any relation. I pick Kathy here, I pick Alice here. They are not related because they are two tables which have been defined as not related. Even if there is a data matching between them, even if I know that the salesperson can kind of relate these two tables are two separate tables within Spotfire. So if I go to edit data table properties and I go to these tables, I can see they have different colors, meaning they are not related. But what I can do is I can create a relation. The moment I will create a relation, you will see their marking will actually match. So when I say manage relation, I create a new relation. I say quarterly results and salesperson, and the relation is salesperson, and I click OK, OK, apply, and you can see the moment I did that, automatically Kathy was marked here. The moment I mark Barry here, in the bottom one also the Barry kind of gets marked. So this is how you create details visualization. So I can right click and I can say create details visualization, and that should be a bar chart, and that should be from the salesperson. And I can see, okay, now it shows me. So let me have this here. I can see this shows me here. I click Barry and I can see, oh, he's from Midwest. I can pick up the salesperson and I can have his year of service like here shown. So okay, it's one which is a year of service, and I pick Barry. If I pick Barry and Colin, I can see, oh, these are two people. One has 4 and one has 1 year of service. So I can show this data. But when I insert a calculated column, I only have access to the columns from quarterly results, or I have access to the columns from salesperson record. There is no way within Spotfire when you are creating a calculated column, you are going to combine columns from two different data tables. Each calculation is kind of from this kind of only option is a single data table. Now, if you want to do, like I still want to have years of service divided to the kind of quarterly results or something like that, what I have to do is I would have to either insert those columns, kind of add that to the data table, which I can do as insert columns, and then I can pick my table, which is inside Spotfire already, so I don't have to kind of get it from outside because I know already the salesperson record is here. I can do that and combine the two tables and then kind of create my calculation. But there is another thing which helps you create that calculation within a visualization. And you can see when I look at years of service, I have an option. I'm able to see an option where I can pick quarterly results also. I can pick a column from quarterly results also. So what I can do is I can say, show me Q2 of 2017. It's like combining these two tables. I'm able to get one column which is coming from one table. I'm able to kind of get another column which is coming from a different table. And let me switch this to a scatter plot. Kind of we could see. So I have this scatter plot where I can say year of service. The years of service is coming from your salesperson, and your Q2 sales is coming from your quarterly results. Now, how could I do this within a visualization? It's not possible in a calculated column, but it is possible within a visualization because there was something else which was happening within a visualization, which is called column matching. So if I have a column matching, I can say salesperson and quarterly results are matched by salesperson. So salesperson kind of joins them. If I have a column matching, then that is possible. So I will be able to do column matching. And what happened is, because I changed my this year of service to something else, that's why that error came, because whichever value I'm using for column matching, that has to be there in the visualization. And you can see it automatically does that for you. So the moment I changed it to year of service, you can see the salesperson record and the column matches this. So column match helps you create a visualization where columns can be, where calculations can be from different data tables. It is only possible within a visualization. If there was no column matching, let me delete it. The moment I delete it, I'm not able to see that option where I can pick another table. So there is no option here to pick another table. It's like gone. I can only pick columns from one table. That's it. And that table may be my original quarterly results, and I'm not able to kind of see anything else. But the moment I go to properties, I go to data, I pick up a column match. I can see I have options to pick multiple tables. So this way you can create custom expressions, which are calculations based on multiple data tables. Provided they have some column matching, you would be able to do that, but you won't be able to kind of do that in a calculated column, because a calculated column is kind of added to data. It is restricted to just that data table. So all the calculations are based on that. So there are two things. One is column matching, which helps you kind of create visualizations or custom expressions from other columns. But the another thing is related tables, which helps you create data, drill down, and relate your data. Now, if I go to data table properties and just delete this relation, so I have deleted this relation. The delete relation, there is no relation. If I click on column, nothing happens on this side, but the column matches still exist. So these are two different things, relating to data tables, and then just creating a column match for creating a visualization based on multiple columns. These are two different things. So that was one of the questions and one of the things which kind of confuses a lot of people. Then I had a question about, this was an interesting question. I kind of picked this up. It is about wandering charts. And there was like no kind of details about what that wandering chart means. But still, the way, there were some questions, how to create a wandering chart, that's what we call it. The way I see that visualization is, so this was a PNG shared. Then we had kind of discussion around this question. So the way I see this, it's simply a scatter plot. And this line is basically line connection. So you have KPI 1 as x-axis, you have KPI 2 as another, and then what you do is you have points and you can have a line connection between those points, and then you can see those points connected. Then this background is an image. Now, if it is an image, then a Spotfire map chart can kind of help create this visualization with background as an image. But today morning itself, I came to know it's not an image. It's a simple fixed line at 100 and at a particular point. So for each KPI, there is kind of a quadrant defined. So what we can do in this case is, we can have a scatter plot. I can have electronics versus some other furniture. So I can always kind of, let me say, marker by some store location. So I see just 4 points. And then what I can do is I can go to properties. I can have line connection. So I can have for each So I can kind of join these by a particular value. So I don't know right now what value I can use to kind of join these. But with line connection, I would see a line combining all these points. So that is possible. What I want to focus here is these lines and curves. I can always have a vertical and a horizontal line. I can edit this horizontal line and say, give me at 40,000 or any value. So I have that particular value. I can have this vertical line and I can say, oh, give me at, say, 40,000 again, any value, wherever I want that line to be. So I have like these 4 quadrants defined, and based on when I kind of change it to 20,000 or something else, I would kind of see those kind of quadrants kind of redefined. What I see is, what possibility is not there is, let me add 40,000 here, or let me edit it and have it at 20,000. So what I see is we can have 4 quadrants, we can have these points, and then we can have line connecting those as well. But in Spotfire, by default, there is nothing as a background image or background color. But definitely this could be an enhancement request because all the functional features are which are already present here. There's a tweak which can be done to make this scatter plot look like exactly the wandering chart. That is because in a scatter plot, I have an option to have X and Y axis labels. Those can be images as well. So I can have something as labeling where I can have images. I have option for X axis as images. So instead of using values, or I could change the shape to kind of square, and those kind of shapes can be enlarged, and they can be shown as different color based on which quadrant they are. So it may be a different way to look. If something is in this quadrant, that would be kind of green. Something is in this quadrant, that would be red, based on your quadrants. So the points automatically in whatever quadrant they are, they will show that color. So that is something which you can do using a scatter plot. So that would be, yeah.
That's great. Could you just go to the color by and show how can they add a rule to define the greater than, less than? So if you look on the right-hand side, it says add rule.
Yeah, so it's store location. Let me pick up some numeric column because the rules would be different. So add rule, you have greater than, equal to, less than or equal to Boolean expression. But if it is a categorical column and you have something as stored location, the rules options are different. You can see it's like strings because not equal to, contains, starts with, ends with Boolean expression.
And when you actually do a Boolean expression, you can actually go in and write your expression using the expression language that Spotfire defines. So just edit it, and it opens up the same window where you can use all of your functions. In fact, if you create your own custom functions using expression function syntax, your own functions would also show up in this drop-down for you to use. The important thing to remember is that in this, unlike all the other calculations, the only values available to you are the column values that you have selected. So over here, we've selected a categorical column, but you could just as easily pick all the X values and all the Y values. So you can get those individual points as well. So Vishaka, if you cancel this, and cancel this, and in the column selector on the drop down, just click on that, and the first 2 values are column names and subsets. If you actually had multiple numeric values, or if you had column relations where you're using another table's X or Y values, you would be able to choose those using these options as well. So it's extremely flexible in what you can do, but it's always helpful if you ask us questions to give us documentation or the design specification of the plot that you're requesting. Thanks, Vishaka.
Yeah, so we will kind of have this wandering plot. If I get more information, we will kind of have it in our subsequent sessions. So there is the last question for today. Scatter plot details visualization with 3 more scatter plots as details. So again, it's again the same question where you want to create a scatter plot, which is a top level plot, and then you want to have a details on a same page or different page. I would simply show this question as a scatter plot. This is my average electronics by, let's say, furniture. And then I can right click and duplicate this visualization. My other visualization may be same plot, but trellised by, let's say, store location. Let me have it as column. So this would be the same plot, but kind of trellised by each store location. Now it's possible, like for each store location, there are sub store numbers, and based on what store location is picked here, you want only that Boston to show up. Again, the same thing which we did at the start of the session, limited by marking, or have it click based on a action control, and it can go to new page, and you can see now I have in a way 3 scatter plots, which is Boston, Los Angeles, New York, and Seattle. Or as DJ mentioned, we can have the filtering schemes, and I can actually not have them as, because it's possible your Los Angeles is at different scale, your New York is at different scale, Seattle is at different scale. I could use like y-axis as multiple scales, like they could have separate scales for each trellis panel. I could do that as well, but sometimes even that is not possible, like you need separate visualizations. So what I could do is I could duplicate this visualization and have one visualization limit by Boston scheme, which I could create as a filtering scheme here and say this is my page 3 scheme, which is without New York. And another one I could have some other scheme. So I could have 2 visualizations or 3 visualizations based on filtering schemes as well. So multiple ways to do it, using data drill down, using marking, or using filtering. Again, it would be always kind of good to see what you actually want, or provide a sample data set that kind of helps us kind of create a solution for you. So that would be all on my side. Thank you. Have a good day.